Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Petagna alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins. And we got a great show for you today. We got a special guest coming on. That is LSU co-OC Cortez Hankton. He'll join the show here in a couple minutes. We'll also recap UA, Under Armour next, Charlotte recap from this weekend. Nice Mother's Day weekend there in North Carolina. And then we'll get to the transaction wire. Some big names coming off the board. TJ Latif. Talk about Terian Grant reclassifying to 2025. We'll also talk, or 2024, Cormani McClain, Agi Hall, a couple names that we have not heard of in a while there with Agi Hall. But first, let's give a little snapshot on our guests that we're bringing onto the show, and that is Cortez Hankton, originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, St. Augustine High School Catholic League. Played his ball at Texas Southern in college, also played 6 seasons in the NFL. And before he got his start in the SEC, he was a receivers coach at Dartmouth, repping the Ivy League, and then promoted to co-OC this year in 2024 for the LSU Fighting Tigers. He also had Malik Nabers, Brian Thomas Jr. drafted in the first round, the second time a pair of receivers have been drafted in the first round for LSU. Also had Ladd McConkey as well. So we'll get to him in a minute. But guys, if you are tuned in to the show, we appreciate you watching. Remember, you can find us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel every Tuesday and Wednesday at noon Eastern time. You can also find us on X. And if you have a question for later in the show, right now is the time to submit it. So make sure to like and subscribe. And without further ado, let's welcome on LSU's co-OC in Cortez Hankton. Coach, I know you're busy, man. Spring evaluation period. We appreciate you coming on the show. How's the transition to the new job of the co-offensive coordinator title?
One, it's a blessing, but it definitely keeps you busy. It's good to work with a great group of guys. Joe Sloan, Brad Davis, Frank Wilson, Slay Nagel. When you have a group of guys that they know football, they know how to recruit at a high level, it makes your jobs a whole hell of a lot easier.
Coach, we're going to jump around a lot of different things here, but I kind of want to get into the early part of your career because the last 3 jobs for you have all been in the SEC. And before we came on the show, you and Andrew were talking about your start at Dr. Phillips, pretty unique there in Orlando. But I want to talk about Dartmouth. You knew my brother, Jance Petagna, back in the day when he worked at Columbia.
Oh, yeah.
Going from Dartmouth to Vandy, even though people will probably tell you, hey, both high academic institutions in their own right, but from an Ivy League school to the SEC, what did you take from that experience being in the Ivies?
Well, the transition from Dartmouth to Vandy was seamless from a standpoint that you were recruiting high academic kids, and so when you're recruiting that population, you have a great understanding of the landscape, what schools to go to, the profile of the type of kid that you're looking for. From that standpoint, it was easy. Now, on a whole nother front, the level of competition, it increases appreciably, and so finding that caliber of athlete, especially from a high academic standpoint that could compete in the SEC, that's where the challenge became.
Coach, I mean, obviously, you said it when we were talking before we hit record. I mean, I've seen you out on the road in Florida. You are in Louisiana. You were just talking about how you were down in New Orleans yesterday. I mean, this is a recruiting podcast, so I got to ask you, I mean, do you have a certain area you love to recruit? LSU, national brand. They go and get guys from wherever, but they also keep that backyard. But from your stops going from the Ivy League to Vandy to Georgia to LSU, any certain regions that you're always kind of looking for talent?
Well, when you're playing in the Southeastern Conference, you like to stay within a footprint, right? The Southeast. We always talk about a 500-mile radius and just the level of talent that they have here. But make no mistake, if there's a receiver in damn Alaska and he the best one in the nation, then we're gonna get him. That's just a fact of the matter right there. We do like to recruit from our own state. We understand the landscape, the makeup and the mentality. We definitely like to put a fence around Louisiana to make sure that our great players don't leave from this state. But outside of that, man, we'll go anywhere to get some good players.
Coach, I brought up earlier in the show when we were introducing you the fact, one, that you're a New Orleans native, two, Catholic League, St. Aug. A lot of people from Louisiana have a high level of familiarity with the players that have come out of St. Augustine, obviously Leonard Fournette, Tyrann Mathieu as well. But, the biggest thing, something that I think I could relate to, but you being from Louisiana, what has it been like just knowing and understanding the expectations that come with a place like LSU to come in on year one with Brian Kelly and really kind of inundate yourself into that place? And what's that just experience been like for you? Because I know, we're talking about it, you being from New Orleans, just being able to spend time with your family. There's a lot of good that comes with that, but there are a lot of expectations as well.
Well, for us, especially being from the state, you just have to embrace it. You embrace the mentality and the makeup that the young men in the state possess. You cultivate the relationships that you've had from before. I mean, guys that I played high school ball with are now high school coaches in the state. And so being able to utilize those relationships and those connections to get the information, especially when a young man is when he's young, we're talking about a young prospect and starting that evaluation process. So just getting ahead, gathering all the information possible to make sure the young man is a fit for LSU.
Cortez, obviously, you show up at LSU. You had two pretty good wide receivers there, and Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas, but they grew underneath you and were selected early on in the NFL draft. Just what was it like growing with those guys, coaching them up, and what were your initial impressions on Malik and Brian from the time you stepped foot in Baton Rouge to when they walked across the stage, and we'll see them playing on Sundays this upcoming season?
Well, first and foremost, just knowing that they had first-round talent, make no mistake about it. They make your job easier from the standpoint of them being extremely gifted, but they're also coachable. These are both young men who wanted to be great, who want to be elite, who wanted to be the best in the nation. And they embrace the challenge every single day to push themselves and compete, opposite of each other, and just make plays and using every opportunity to get better. I remember recruiting both of them when they were extremely young, still in high. We're talking about sophomores in high school. Well, Brian Thomas, he was a basketball player, extremely gifted. I mean, I'm talking about a freak of nature, great size, and his ability to move, to run, to bend, and just being able to go attack the football. You knew that at some point he was going to turn the corner and be a dude. And with Malik, just an ultra competitor, explosive, had a knack for playing strong to the ball. And it was just developing that skill set and owning it to where he can become an elite receiver.
Coach, I want to follow up on those two, and heard you talking about this on Andy Staples' podcast when you went on a couple of weeks ago. But do you remember? Was there a moment in time where you got that first glimpse of Malik Nabers and that chip on his shoulder? Because we keep hearing that, like we heard it in the pre-draft process, like Malik Nabers is different in terms of that just kind of dog mentality that he has. Is there an example or two? And then the other follow-up on Brian Thomas Jr. is, you talked about how special of an athlete he is. You saw that on the basketball court. You also mentioned that he's got a high level of football intelligence. I thought that was pretty interesting because you think about a guy that just was so productive, one of the most productive receivers in the country, especially when it came to catching touchdown passes out of the slot fade machine. Maybe an example of that, because I think that's something maybe people gloss over. I was kind of fascinated when you touched on that.
So let me hit on Malik first. So in 2022, when I first got here, we go into spring ball. And you really understand and get to see a guy's competitiveness when you go to one-on-ones. And it was amazing to watch the way that he dominated that period every single day and every opportunity that he got. It was like whoever was in front of him, he had a mentality that I'm going to conquer and destroy. And that's just the way that he approached the game. And so that was really the first glimpse that I had to see. I always knew he had it in him, just the way that he talked, the way he walked, the way he worked. But to be able to see it, first person and live, it was different. And so you knew that was going to push him. And BT, on the other hand, and talking about his football intelligence, man, he just would pick up things so fast. We would have these new and heavy installs, and you're going over these concepts. And I just remember one time we had a pretty heavy install day. And so BT was like, hey, coach, everybody, we break the meeting. We're about to go onto the practice field. And BT was like, hey, coach, just click through the pictures one more time. And I clicked through probably, I want to say 25 pictures in 30 seconds. And he was like, okay, cool, I got it. Right. And he goes out there and he executes every assignment to the T. And that's just who he is. He's also the young man who can play one position every day at practice, and master that. And then on game day, if you need him to switch, he can play a position without repping it and still be, mistake free from a assignment standpoint. And so, he's definitely, he has like this photographic memory, man. He sees it one time and he has it.
You already mentioned recruiting Malik and Brian at different points, especially when they were young. We posted you were coming on the show, and the replies were all about ask him what he's looking for in a high school receiver. Now, I'm not saying give us the state secrets, but some of the obvious things you look for. Is it the basketball? Is it the football IQ? I mean, what is Cortez Hankton looking for at that wide receiver position when he starts to build out his recruiting board?
Man, it's such a range of things that you're looking for when you're talking about the receiver profile. But let's talk about just some traits. First and foremost, as a receiver, you have to be ultra confident and competitive. And then adding on to that, like, is he coachable? Is he willing to continue to add to the twos, to have at his disposal to go out and win the one-on-one matchups consistently? The next part is, can he consistently create separation? Because if you look from the beginning of time, man, at the receiver position, your job is to get open and catch the ball. And so can he create separation? Can he run? Does he have ball skills? What does his balance and body control look like? And also, last, and I think this is the most important, is he a finisher? What does he do when he gets the ball in his hand? We're not looking for possession receivers. I talk about all the time, and we're looking to always create explosives, especially when teams, have you stop short of the sticks, right? Can you take a 6-yard hitch to the house for 70 yards?
Coach, it's almost like you're reading our script of questions. I had one about separation, how important it is. You just touched on that, especially, I was watching Ladd McConkey the other day. That guy is just, in terms of textbook route runner technician, but always creating separation off the line of scrimmage and at the top of the route. He's kind of textbook. I wonder for you, is there a player or two that kind of comes to mind that made you think a little bit differently about the evaluation process? Like, hey, you know what? I didn't give as much credence as maybe I thought I should have on the front end, but this guy has been in my room. I either inherited him or maybe he developed a skill set that I didn't expect that makes me think a little bit different about how I'm going to go about this process in the future.
Well, I'll talk about two guys who I felt like were under-recruited, one being Ladd McConkey. One, just once again, confident and competitive, right? He had those two things, and he consistently brought a mentality of work every single day to practice. Also, he was extremely coachable. He had this knack and savviness for understanding how to create separation at the top of routes. The tempo of speed and his route running, the suddenness, the quickness, his ability to explode and be efficient out of the cut. Those are the things, man, like he would consistently work on, and he began to master. When you look at him, you're like, hey, man, this is a dude. He's going to have an opportunity to play on Sunday. I thought A.D. Mitchell was another one of those guys, who was under-recruited, extremely twitchy and sudden for his size. The one thing that he had to focus on was understanding how to use his body and be under control and to change up the tempos. But he also became a second-day draft pick. Another guy that I think about in terms of helping me become a better coach, especially from a development standpoint, is Trent Sherfield, a young man that I had at Vanderbilt, who's now going into his 7th year in NFL, right? And people may think that he's not a sexy name, but this is a young man who came in every single day and was about the work. Like, there were times he would come in and ask me exactly, hey, coach, what do I need to work on after the game? And like, sometimes it'll be a text message after Saturday game, and we're in there grading the film on Sunday, and I look outside and he's on the field and he's working on that specific thing. And so just that proactiveness and that ownership of being responsible for your own development, that's another redeeming quality that young men, if they possess it, man, they can go far. And Trent Sherfield was definitely that.
Obviously, a lot has changed recently in college football. We don't need to get into that, but you keep bringing up with all these receivers we've talked about, just that drive and that willingness to get better. I mean, when you are out on the road recruiting, how do you kind of identify that? How do you, is it something you see during an in-person evaluation? I know you guys at LSU do an excellent job of getting these high-profile recruits to work out for you in a summer camp setting. Like, is it just kind of a combination of things, or when you see it, you kind of know real fast?
Well, when you watch a young man practice, one, you're looking at like how fast does he practice? Like, does he have the mentality that he's getting ready for a game? In the speed in which he's practicing. Is he competing? Is he taking plays off? All right. And so you'll find out real fast if the kid or the young man loves the game of football. Now, especially as a college coach, when you're there and that young man is not doing that, then you're like, okay, he knows I'm here and this is the best that he's given, then maybe, he's not the guy for us. But when you see a guy and he's out there every single play, he's playing a game full speed, I can live with that. Right. Because that right there, that shows me your mentality and the way that you're approaching. I mean, you're approaching the game in terms of preparation, and so that's extremely important. And also when a young man comes to camp, I think about last year in the process, we had two young men who were not as rated as high on our board, but they came in and competed. And I'm talking about like really killed the camp. And right there, they were offered and going to be a part of our football team. And so, while the recruiting has sped up so much, I still believe that those in-person evaluations are extremely important to find out if a young man has the makeup that you want to be an elite player and to help you continue to be a championship contender.
Coach, out of those three names that you mentioned, you talked about McConkey, you talked about Adi Mitchell, Sherfield was the third one. Were all three of those guys camp guys for you?
No, actually, so Adi Mitchell was a camp guy. So I had opportunity to see him in person, and I was like, man, you know what? He got a shot. Lab McConkey was actually a late evaluation, and I had opportunity to go see him at a basketball game. And a funny story about the game that I go to, his team was down by 11 with a minute and a half left. And it was the damnedest thing, like it was off a movie. He essentially willed his team back in the last minute and a half, tied it up. They go in overtime and then win the game in overtime. And I had opportunity to see his competitiveness, his toughness, his leadership, all of those things are the redeeming traits and qualities that we look for as coaches that help you build the championship football team. And Trent Sherfield was a guy that I inherited at Vandy. By the time I got there, he was a true sophomore, and he was a quarterback in high school. And I'm talking about extremely raw at the position. But you watch him day in and day out, and you see his continued development. You see every day he's getting better. You see every year he's adding something else to his game to separate himself. And now he's going on into the 7th year in the NFL.
You brought up basketball with Brian Thomas. You brought up basketball with Ladd, who I believe was also a high school quarterback at one point.
He was.
Not going to box you in here, but if you had to choose one other sport for a wide receiver, is it track or is it basketball?
I can't do it. I can't do it. I'm sorry. I can't do it. You know what? For me, I love kids and young men that play multiple sports. Right? Whether it's track, basketball, or baseball, right? Track, the young man's ability to run, but not only run, can he run efficiently and does he have sprint endurance? Because that's where the home run hitters come from. The ability with guys to finish. In basketball, is he explosive, right? Can he explode off the ground quickly? Can he high point the ball? Does he have really good balance and body control? In baseball, his ability to track the ball, right? As a hitter and also as an outfielder, right? And so those are the things when you look at certain skills that are transferable to the game of football, you're able to evaluate each and every one of those sports in terms of those specific skills.
Are you willing to give a receiver in this specific use case a little bit more grace? Maybe if they haven't put it together on the field, they've shown flashes of it, but there is some redeeming qualities in terms of what you see in terms of the speed, the verified speed in the track and field events as well. You mentioned Ladd McConkey in basketball. Is there a little bit more saying, hey, we've seen some other things, athletic indicators that make me think that there's a little bit more to the player athletically than what we've seen on the field. I'll take the physical traits, leave it to me to kind of coach them up and get them ready for the next level.
Yeah, and I think the one that sticks out the most is when a young man has elite speed, right, and verifiable elite speed. That's something that, hey, I can't coach that, right? I'm a developer of the guys playing a receiver position, but I'm not a speed trainer, right? And so when guys come in with that elite trait, you feel like that's something that you can work on and develop that young man into becoming a route runner, becoming a better receiver. And so like that's the one trait that I feel like that definitely sticks out. Now, another one, if a young man just has elite ball skills and he may be raw as a route runner, and if a guy has elite ball skills, he doesn't have to separate as much because he has the ability to make the competitive catch. He has a large catch radius. He understands how to use catch extension to separate himself and keep the body protected from the ball and defender. And so those are some of the things that you look for in evaluation process is, does he have one elite trait that we can take and potentially, help him become an elite receiver?
Coach, from a personnel standpoint, obviously, I was Andrew working more on the media side of this. I used to be on the personnel side. I wonder, like, the way the game has changed, and it rapidly changes kind of year over year, right? But especially with the portal, we don't have to get into that. How important in your eyes, just have you seen over the last 2 to 3 years, is it to have a player personnel department that's really on top of the game to set you guys up, especially like during this period, the transfer window as well, to where you feel like, all right, you're equipped with all the information that continues to kind of trade hands rapidly, but really those guys putting you in a position to succeed. How important is that really support staff right now?
It's extremely important, in terms of gathering all the information that you need, whether it's the background, family history, character, just understanding, especially when you talk about the transfer portal, because it's a small window to try to understand and get to know a young man, right? Well, you're recruiting a high school kid or prospect. There's an opportunity to truly cultivate the relationship and understand the makeup of this kid. But when you're talking about a window that's really short, you have to have as much information possible to make the decision that's best for your team in terms of getting it right. And so that the personnel department is extremely important in gathering all that information.
Cortez, obviously you've worked or you're working under Brian Kelly, but you also worked under Kirby Smart there at Georgia. Is there anything you've tried to kind of take away from either of those and implement into your own coaching philosophy, something that sticks with you that maybe you got from Kirby and something from BK?
Well, first from Coach Kelly, man, I think he does an outstanding job being consistent with our process and what we do every single day, as well as making sure that we value the traits over talent and making sure that the young man has, once again, the redeeming qualities that we're looking for in terms of the maturity and opportunity for growth, not only as a football player, but as a man, and also making sure that he's going to do the right things off the field and in the classroom, because that's extremely important, and working with Kirby, and experience just the everyday urgency that everything matters. Right. I think he does an outstanding job, from that standpoint in building that competitiveness within the building. And so in terms of, having the opportunity to work under both guys who won a lot of games has been really instrumental to my growth as a coach.
Coach, we'll get you out of here on this last one, but I'm always fascinated to kind of ask this question anytime I get around coaches. But is there one player that comes to mind that you feel made you a lot better as a coach, maybe challenged you in a lot of different ways day to day, but one guy that kind of sticks out?
Well, the one, and I just named, I got to go back to Trent Sherfield, right? And because look, I'm gonna tell you right now, and when people ask me this question, the first day I saw Trent, I could not have told you that he was going to be an NFL player, right? And so, when you take a young man like that and you watch him grow and he wants to get better and he's trying to figure out what else to do, he wants to learn the game and how to move and play different positions to increase his versatility and value. He's the one that truly pushes you because he's he's self-made, right? And maybe he wasn't initially blessed with all of the physical skill set that the other guys possess, but you saw a young man who worked constantly and diligently every single day to become the player that he is, and now he's earning the fruits from his labor.
Coach, we appreciate you jumping on with us. And for us, man, it's an educational experience. You're one of the best that you do in the business. So we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. I hope you have a great rest of your off season. Looking forward to watching you guys this year. Appreciate you coming on.
And I appreciate you guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, Coach. Drew, we got a great rest of the show. And as producer Sanlay reminds me, make sure to visit go247.com for all the latest on LSU recruiting. That is the place to go. Sonny Ship, Bryce Kuhn, and the boys doing a great job over there. How about Cortez Hankton, man, native of New Orleans, Louisiana? We appreciate him jumping on the show. And Drew, it's always, I think, validating for us when you got one of the guys doing it at the highest level to kind of hear him speak of all the things that we really like to talk about. You talk about like the multi-sport, how you take that into consideration. Him talking about basketball specifically, I thought the interesting story on Lab McConkey was really, really neat as well. And then the intangibles of the position, and then also the camp evaluation, the live person evaluation, speaking specifically to that. Like guys like A.D. Mitchell, maybe a guy that was a little bit under-recruited from an industry standpoint, ends up being a top 50 draft pick in the NFL draft. So initial thoughts, takeaways. I know we just got off the horn with our guy, but just anything that you thought maybe kind of popped to you.
Try to box him in. I thought he was going to go basketball over track, but he quickly dodged that and brought baseball into the equation. Are we considering that in an exotic sport?
No.
That's still a traditional.
That's traditional.
Sport. No, the one takeaway for me, getting in the end zone, and I've heard that before from a lot of different wide receiver coaches. How do you finish, right? I mean, guys can, you can catch 94 passes in a season, but how many of them are you getting in the end zone? So that's something that I wrote down a year ago in my notebook, and something I'm always looking for with the wide receivers. All right, are you scoring touchdowns? And hey, LSU, the only team in the country with two players that had 14 touchdown receptions last year, Malik Nabers and Brian Thomas. So it seems like that thought process is applying to the field on Saturdays.
I thought the Brian Thomas story about the football IQ and the, photogenic memory was pretty interesting, because you watch Brian Thomas and you're like, all right, this is a guy that's got obviously a great combination of size, athleticism, and speed. And, I brought it up, his ability to just win out of the slot at an extremely high rate. And you kind of box Brian Thomas in a little bit and say, this is what he is. But to hear his position coach talk about, hey, if you needed him to play one or two other positions, he was able to do that just because of his ability to retain information and apply it very quickly. So I like that. I like the marriage of, these are the physical traits that we seek, but every single one of those guys that he talked about being successful, whether it was about Malik Nabers' competitiveness, whether it was about Brian Thomas's football IQ, whether it was about Lad McConkey's ability to work on an exceptional trait and accentuate that strength when it came to short area separation. It's cool to marry up the objective side of the evaluation process with, hey, listen, these guys all have a different character trait that kind of separates them in the process as well. And you marry that with their physical abilities. That's why they are where they are.
I really wanted to ask him about his young guys in that room, but that was on the no-fly list.
Yeah, we didn't talk about it in the show, but we talked about it before the show. Pretty interesting background in Dr. Phillips. He was talking about some of the guys that came out of Dr. Phillips High School in Orlando. He also talked about one of his first coaching opportunities, which was at Dr. Phillips, but at UCF, right? And working with Drew Hughes, now with the Jacksonville Jaguars, had been all over the place in college football. You think about that a little bit. I always find that really interesting. I don't think it's a coincidence that some of the best position coaches in the country, it comes to mind, Cortez Hankton, Todd Hartley, have these personnel backgrounds. They're cross-trained, so that's kind of fascinating as well. So we appreciate Cortez Hankton, official friend of the pod, along with Joe Sloan. Through the retweet out there, Coach Sloan, we see you. We appreciate you, man. But Drew, we got more business to attend to. We had the UA Next Charlotte camp this weekend on Sunday, Mother's Day. Myself, Anna Adams were out there in Charlotte. Great town, man. Really enjoyed it. Matthews, North Carolina. Had a beer over there. That was pretty nice. Enjoyed that. Got in late Saturday night. Besides the point, the alpha dog, 3-star defensive lineman Trejon Odum. Big day for him. And also a guy that's being recruited at a very high level. You got Oregon, USC, Ohio State. Drew really just recently starting to get more and more familiar with this kid. Can play in a 3-down front, can play in a 4-down front. I like his multiplicity. I like the way he plays the run. I think he's got a high motor, and he's super powerful. All that really just was very, very apparent once you saw him on the field on Sunday.
I was going to say, I'm waiting for you to kind of educate me on Trejon Odum, who you pointed out is originally from the West Coast. So you see these, former Pac-12 programs involved in the recruitment. Coop, let me ask you this. As we continue to learn more and more about this 2025 class, I think certainly IDL, there are not a ton of bodies out there. Is Trejon Odum, is he, someone that's being over-recruited because of the lack of numbers, or is this a potential riser for us at some point down the line?
I think it's a little bit of both. Right. And my biggest takeaway is I'd rather have this guy now, get him in my program and develop this guy who's a big body. He's an above average athlete. He can play multiple positions. I talked about the scheme versatility, and I really like his energy too. I like the way he kind of bounces around the field. He's one of those guys you kind of see a little bit of a gravity to him. But yeah, I think the other point of this is we've seen the cost of defensive linemen in the spring portal. Why wouldn't you want to get these guys at their cheapest rate at the high school level, right? So a guy like Trejon Odum, I was talking to somebody in his camp. I just thought, it's a great time to be a defensive lineman, great time to be a big body, great time to actually be a quality candidate at that position, because these are the dudes that are getting paid. And, quite honestly, let's call a spade. And I'm not talking about in Trejon Odum's case. But if you have that combination of size, athleticism, and then on top of that, you have the position versatility, I mean, cha-ching, right? I mean, these are the guys in the market that are very, very difficult to find. So a little bit of both. I like Trejon Odum. I like what he brings to the field. But certainly you can understand there's just a premium on beef right now. That's the way it is. It's not inflation, maybe inflation in the college game, but that's where a good time to be a defensive lineman in my mind.
Well, I used to always, let's rewind to 3-4 years ago. I would tell some of these defensive linemen or kind of hint at it. Hey man, if you hold out your options in terms of, you can level up almost going from, all right, maybe I'm a mid power 4 tier type of kid to now I'm going to potential college football playoff contender, because there's only so many big bodies out there. And I've always thought one of the biggest mistakes schools make, especially in this time of the year right now, coaches go out on the road, they hit the spring practices down here in Florida, and they see these defensive linemen and it's, I don't know, he's not a complete product. And I'm like, well, guess what? He's going to be the same size kid 4 months from now, right before the signing period. So, you better keep recruiting him. And that always kind of rings true as the cycle progresses. Coop, read your article. You can find it on 247sports.com. Tell me about some of these other guys. Brian Rowe, wide receiver, committed to South Carolina. We also had Kendre Harrison, number 1 tight end in 2026. What other names do we need to know coming out of the Queen City?
Yeah, Brian Rowe's a good one, right? Because we're talking about South Carolina. They just had a first-round draft pick, and Xavier Legette, number 32, the last one in the first round with the Carolina Panthers. And this is a heck of a get, man. I mean, I'm excited about this kid. We had kind of circled him coming into this event.
I'm a Brian Rowe guy.
You're a Brian Rowe guy. Greg Biggins is a Brian Rowe guy. I think the rest of the team is a Brian Rowe guy. I think I was just late to the party, but getting to see him in person and move, and I think I hit on this in the article, I love the route tempo. I mean, you talk about a guy that's extremely under control and smooth and very fluid, gets in and out of his breaks. Also a really natural pass catcher as well. So all those things that we just talked about with Coach Hankton, he's got a lot of that, right? He's got the multi-sport background that we like, smooth mover, applies it all on the football field. So that is definitely, I don't think this is a surprise here, but definitely a kind of a trend up guy for us. And then Kendre Harrison, you just don't see a lot of 6'7" multi-sport hoopers, 245 pounds. That one can move the way that he does, and he's not really a big like change speed, burst, explosiveness guy. But you see him on one-on-ones. You see him working out of the slot. You see him winning using his body, high pointing the football on a seam route in the middle of the end zone. And I'm like, is like Jimmy Graham here, right? Like that's me growing up in New Orleans and watching the Saints my entire life. That's kind of what came to my mind. And this guy only took 2, maybe 3 reps in the one-on-one period. And that part, I think I called you. I was like, oh, I would have loved to see more. But the biggest takeaway is that he dominated those reps, right? The other thing is it's not just the one-on-one period. You see him move around a little bit. You jog back to the tape, and it's like, all right, well, the two-way snaps, you see the physicality on defense. He can bang in line if you need him to. I think that the comp that will come up is Darnell Washington. He's a lot easier of a mover than Darnell Washington was. Darnell Washington had a little bit of stiffness, was a freak athlete. Like this kid he's got some like wiggle, some suddenness, some flexibility.
Well, I'm waiting for the footage to come out because I saw Darnell Washington, I think it was Miami's Paradise Camp. James Williams, who was selected in the 5th round of the Tennessee Titans, he tried to match him up in one-on-ones, and it was kind of one of those moments which you were just describing, like the seam route over the middle, and it's just a cheat code throwing up to Darnell or Kendre Harrison. You want a theme for the 2026 cycle? I know we're still working on 2025 cycle themes, but Kendre Harrison, like what happens with him in terms of his recruitment? Anna Adams brought it up. He's visited, I think, UNC 15 times, and like only a handful of those were for football. Like he's a legitimate basketball recruit. When's the last time we've had one of these 2-sport hoopers who's like a member of USA Basketball, like that, organization? I don't like. There's a chance he might not play football, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think we've had one like this. We've had guys that are very, very good hoopers, but understand like that it's a big step from being a good hooper and being a collegiate hooper at an ACC school like North Carolina. First thing that came to my head was Julius Peppers, right?
And
they kind of
Anna wrote that they've had Peppers reach out to Harrison.
Yeah, so we say maybe we throw around that term a little bit more loose than it should be in terms of, he's a legit hooper, and maybe that's like a double-double guy in high school. Kendre Harrison, as you talked about, like with the USA basketball camp, like, no, this guy's legit. The other thing about him is like, dude, the ball skills are real. This is not like a guy trying to figure it out. He's got very natural ball skills. Love the way he attacks a football. So he's a fun one. I got the lawn service pulling into the backyard right now. So if you hear a little bit of that in the background, just flag me down. I'll put my mic on mute and let you go. But
last thing I'll say on him, I think he'd be like a top 32 edge rusher as well. Like his defensive line tape is impressive. Anyone else from Charlotte you want to touch on before we?
Let's talk about this Javon Gilmore kid, right? This is a kid that I like. We had him listed at 6'6". I had to go on the profile, change it. He's 6'3.5". He went to Elite 11 Atlanta a couple weeks ago, and that was like the first time I had to like look up for my roster and be like, all right, it's a good looking kid. You see him move a little bit. Elastic arm. A&M offered last week. Arkansas offered yesterday. This is the dude during the spring evaluation period that's going to be a guy that I think a lot of teams are going to fall in love with. I also love the way he kind of attacked the deep third. He's got to put it on tape. He's shown flashes, but he's an upward trajectory for me.
Go ahead.
To
point out 2026 quarterback.
2026, yes.
Gaffney, South Carolina.
Correct. CJ Wiley, another guy, seeing him in person for the first time. 6'4", hovering around 200 pounds. His dad played at LSU. 10.83 in the 100-meter, averaged like 21.7 yards per reception. He is a big physical kid that, like, his job is getting vertical, and I think he does that really well. I like his straight line ability. Then how about this one? I'd be remiss, man. Clinton Portis' son, Camden Portis, 2026 corner out of North Carolina. Dude, it's something about the genetics when you see these guys whose dads played at a high level. The feel for the game just kind of sticks out. Sure, he's got really good short area change of direction. He's got really good suddenness. but his instincts in man-to-man plus playing the ball in the air were pretty second to none. And I just liked the way he handled his business. It was no showboating. He was just a pro, and he was there to work. So high on him. A couple other names, Jaquavius Dodd, Aiden Harris, Samari Matthews, and then last shout-out, Isaiah Deloach, man, going to Rutgers, 6'1", 200 pounds, got a couple 10-8s to his name as a junior. He can run. I talked about TJ McGill, the running back that I think won every rep besides one, had a wheel route on Isaiah Deloach, was with him every step of the way. So you think about Rutgers, what they're doing. I know they're not like the brand name, but they were fun. And then last one, sorry, this is the last one. Faison Brandon, the number one player in 2026. I called you. I don't know if you've watched it yet. Went back, watched the Elite 11 ATL camp, and then seen him yesterday. Like, man, I just like the way he operates. He's a little mechanical, upper and lower body. I wouldn't call it stiffness, more like a rigidness, but that ball pops. And the other thing, it's not just like you see guys with strong, powerful arms, and sometimes they get people get mistaken. Oh, he's got a strong, powerful arm. That doesn't mean they're an accurate passer. Right? They can throw the football, but that does not mean that they understand or have a good grip on the nuance of being a passer. This guy's ability to change speeds, drive the football in the deep third, the intermediate as well. I like this kid. And, I know we talked about it with Jeremiah Smith. I'm really glad we stuck him where we stuck him. So good seeing him twice in a month.
Hey, Camden Portis's kid, I saw him at OT7 Orlando. I texted our guys at the Miami site, hey, normally sometimes there's these legacies and you're like, okay, they're kind of in the spotlight because of who their dad is. But I said right away, hey, I think this kid can play at Miami. Cooper, he's there is he in North Carolina or South Carolina?
North Carolina.
Yeah. He plays like a South Florida DB. Like he's been, press man since he was 8 years old there in the park. He can play and he's got some size to him. I think he's certainly a name to know in the 2026 cycle. One to track, decked out in Miami gear as well.
I love how we just flew right through that. That was great. Just kind of like up tempo, good segment. UA Charlotte and I'll tell you this, I think you and I talked about it on the phone. That's a deep camp, dude. Like I struggled to like keep up with it, and fortunately we had Anna there. I think I told you, I was like, I might need you there next year. I mean, Mother's Day, I get it. Tough one, but like, the Carolinas, kids from around that area, certainly a lot of talent. Guys, we talked about it, the Oyster Boys every Tuesday and Wednesday, but also make sure to subscribe to 247sports.com, excuse me. Also, you can find us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. A lot going on. Our recruiting team is killing it. Tom Loy, Anna Adams, Brandon Huffman, the rest of the crew. Brian Doan, Blair and Gulo, the best of the best, putting out elite recruiting content on 247sports.com. So make sure to sign up today. All right, the transaction wire, let's get into it. A couple notable commitments over the weekend. One of those, TJ Latif, number 16 quarterback in the country, top 247 quarterback on the back end there. He commits to Nebraska. Drew, if I remember correctly, we've talked about TJ Latif. It seems like this one's been trending this way for a while. Dylan Raiola is going to play, more than likely going to be the starter very early on at Nebraska. You take that into consideration with TJ Latif a little bit. It makes me kind of warm up to the idea even more.
Love the fit. I don't know if Nebraska could have done better. I think maybe the conversation would have been TJ Latif and Madden Iamalieva. But TJ Latif is the guy that they were in on much earlier. It's never going to be easy to get a top 247 quarterback after you took a 5-star and more notably a high profile 5-star quarterback. I mean, aside from Arch Manning and maybe DJ Lagway, is there a more popular name just in the average fan, the casual circle, the past few years in Dylan Raiola? We're already seeing it. Nebraska, Colorado, that's going to be a primetime game week 2. And, what is it? It's Shadur versus Raiola. So I like the fit. TJ Latif dug into his Elite 11 workout. He's got a strong arm as well. He can certainly rip it. A little bit older for the grade, which is interesting, Cooper, because when you look at his body, I mean, he's got some size to him, but he doesn't look like he's had this physical maturation, which I think could take place there in Lincoln in terms of him, getting in a squat rack, a developmental year, being in that group that's early in. I think he could potentially unlock some more. Would like to see him be a little bit quicker in the pocket. I thought when you flip on that Elite 11 workout, kind of a build-up passer when he's asked to move around, but he can throw it around the yard. And I think for Nebraska, they brought in 2 quarterbacks last year, Raiola, Daniel Kalen, who was an Elite 11 finalist. I don't know if they were going to do better than TJ Latif. And I think if you're a Nebraska fan, you got to be fired up about this addition.
I like the timeline, for Latif, because we'd put Latif kind of in that developmental category, right? He's one of those guys that you want more of from a production standpoint. I think you see the flashes of talent. It's just consistency for Latif. Now he gets to go to a place and really kind of develop on his own timeline under Marcus Satterfield. And we'll see what happens with Dylan Raiola. It's going to play a big part of that as well. All right, Drew, how about this? Reclassification news. Terian Grant from Tennessee committed to Purdue. I've been mixing these up. 2026 to 2025, correct?
Yeah, but I think he was originally a member of 2025 and he went to 2026.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Here's the thing. Terian Grant, all right? So he was our number 5 corner in the class of 2026. Guy we liked a lot. I mean, he is a reactionary outside corner with long limbs to match on the perimeter. I mean, this is what you're looking for. On top of that, he's got really, really good speed and explosive metrics in track and field. I guess he wasn't going to be able to play in Tennessee. He's already played 4 years of high school football. He could have went to a prep school, but now he is enrolling at Purdue. He's going to join the Boilermakers this summer. They announced him as a signee. Dude, I think this is we talk about the reclassification. It's rare for these guys to make an impact year one. The results we have seen recently isn't so good with reclassification. But I think if you're Purdue, this is like a slam dunk, getting Terian Grant signed, sealed, and delivered on campus because no one else can poach him. I mean, Terian Grant had taken visits to Michigan. He had been to Alabama. I think his stock was only going to rise, having seen him work out in person at Battle Miami. I mean, how valuable are cornerbacks, Cooper? You talk about the interior defensive linemen. Well, look at the NFL draft and all these big corners. This is what teams want. And I think more and more schools – we're going to make a move on Terian Grant. So now you got Ryan Walters. Okay, I'll take you right now. We'll get you in the program. Are you going to play year one? I don't know. Maybe you get your feet wet for 4 games, but he's there and you can start coaching him up. And let's talk about Purdue in that secondary. Second top 247 edition for Purdue. They got Coy Beasley last cycle. Also added some talent in the transfer portal. Nyland Green returned 3 corners with starting experience. 2 guys I like from Florida. Markevius Brown being one of them. Derek Rogers being the other. I think Purdue's got a sneaky good secondary, and Terian Grant is only going to elevate the ceiling in terms of what that unit could be in the coming years.
Not to mention a freshman All-American, right? On the back end. Daniel Thieneman,
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah. He was
the name right?
He was an Oyster Boys favorite in the fall.
He was
months.
an Oyster. That was a little bit of a shot in the dark, but we got some good intel on that one. Made us look good. But yeah, Purdue, Ryan Walters. I mean, I don't know. Like I have not seen Purdue recruit like this, and I don't know. Maybe since I've been following Purdue recruiting, and I'm not one of those guys been in on the ground and following it extensively. They just seem to have like a different type of aggression and a little bit more like weight to them than we've seen in years past.
All right. I have this written down to ask you. Do we see more of maybe you're not traditional powers trying to lock elite recruits in early like this? Could this become a trend?
I think it makes sense. It makes me feel better that Terian Grant was originally a 2025.
Yeah. Summer birthday.
Right.
Could have went either way.
The first thing that came to my mind was Tony Grimes, right? Reclassifying, joining North Carolina, he ends up transferring to Texas A&M, and it's kind of been a dud for him, in terms of what we've seen out of Tony Grimes. So
How about Marcus Washington? Went to Georgia, to Louisville. I think he's at Syracuse now. That's another one.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It might be limited sample size, but I don't think it's very encouraging what we have of reclassifications at the DB spot. Is that
Des
correct?
Ricks.
Desi Ricks, wait and see, right? Still early. Wow, forgot about Desi Ricks. Are you ready to talk about another DB?
Yeah.
Let's talk about Cormani McClain, the 5-star in 2023, number 5 corner in the transfer portal. Well, he's visited Florida unofficially, going to take an official there this week. And it sounds like there's a possibility that he could walk on. Drew, what a crazy recruitment for not just Colorado, every team involved at some point, I feel like, dealt with Cormani McClain. Alabama, Miami, and Florida. They were all kind of seemingly left at the altar at some point. Your initial reaction to what this potential marriage would look like?
Head scratcher. I mean, I don't know. I've thought about this a lot over the past 24 hours. Is this what Billy wants to do? Is this external pressure? I mean, I think Cormani just needs to go to a place that he can buy in and develop. And then you look at Florida's 2 deep, what they have return at cornerback. You know, they got Jakeem Jackson, Jason Marshall. Like, I don't think if Cormani were to pick UF, he would be thrust into action. My biggest concern, I think, if you're Florida, is just kind of adding this distraction to the locker room when you open up the season against a rival in Miami week 1. So I was surprised it came across the ticker. I don't know. What your thoughts, your takeaways? Am I off base here?
Yeah, I think it's risk reward calculation, which is every team right now that is examining whether or not Cormani McClain would be a good fit for their team. Buy low, potential high output. That's best case scenario. But if I'm Billy Napier and, the head coach, I'm putting my foot down and say, here's a preferred walk-on spot. This is your last chance. You know it. I know it. The public knows it. We're not paying you a dime. And if you really want to be here, then you're going to show us that you want to be here. And any tomfoolery, anything towards the negative, you're out. See ya. And then you'll be on your 3rd program in 2 years. That's the only way that I would negotiate that. And obviously, they're getting to know each other. They already know each other. But this is it for Cormani McClain. And I'm sure he's got other options on the table that probably include group of 5 programs that would be willing to kind of shell out some cash for him. But I think it's important to Cormani that he plays on the biggest stage. I think that's really important. So, the other thing you brought up, like you look at Florida's secondary, yeah, sure, they're young. They got some players there. Devin Moore, Jakeem Jackson, Jordan Castell, Asa Turner, Jason Marshall, Sharif Denson. Like that's the other part that I would evaluate and be like, do we really need it? Because this is a make or break year for Billy Napier. So if this goes south and becomes its own little sideshow, was it really worth it? Right. And that's just another thing that becomes a very unforgivable sin in the short term versus a guy that's coaching for his job this next year.
And that's the other thing, Cooper. Like, I mean, I feel like I got a grasp on the Sunshine State. It instantly becomes, all right, is Cormani going to play? What's the update on Cormani? Yeah. How is Cormani coming along? And you're going to get that from the casual fan all season long. And you already got it with DJ Lagway, even though, I think they got a good quarterback situation in Graham Mertz. Did you see he was on our boy Jim Nagy's big board for the 2025 Senior Bowl? Forgot to point out, I've heard Graham Mertz as a perfect scorer on one of his cognitive tests. I heard that this summer at some point. So just got to get that out there in the public space. But yeah, the risk reward in that scenario you described, right? Okay, you come in, you mess up, you're out. That has to work, but Cormani has to love football. Does he love football? I don't know.
Yeah, typically the teams that are able to pull this one off are the ones with the coach that has the cachet to do it and the credibility. But if you're Florida, listen, if I was in that building, yeah, I'm kicking the tires. Doesn't mean we're going to pull the trigger, but I'm kicking the tires and seeing what this was like. I believe it was Cormani, his mom, and his agent that were on the visit. So I don't know. I think the financial piece is such a big part of it. But if I'm Florida, there's nothing on the table for you. There isn't. So I'd be interested
And I've
to see how
also
that works
heard
out.
I've also heard that agency has developed or assembled a team to keep Cormani on course, for what it's worth. I've heard that's been pitched to programs around the country. I don't know what that means. Feels crazy to talk about a college player in that sense when you have these programs that have, personnel staffs that are 50 people deep. But that's what that agency has done.
Yeah. Cormani's got to help Cormani. That's where we are, and Deion Sanders talked about it. The accountability piece is a big piece. So until he can look at himself in the mirror and say, I am the problem, then it's never going to get solved, and I hope for his sake, he figures that out. It's going to be interesting to see if Florida ends up taking a shot on him.
If it does work out, think about that potential cornerback duo, Jakeem Jackson and Cormani McClain.
Talented, for sure. Long way to go. This seems like the perfect off-ramp to the next topic. Agi Hall, number 7 receiver in 2021. You remember him? Signed with Alabama, transferred to Texas. Now he's heading to UCF as a walk-on. When's the last time we heard Agi Hall's name?
I said it when I texted you last night. How many lives does this cat have?
He's big. He's fast. He can run.
He's an example of you always get a chance if you got the traits. Same thing you said for Florida. With UCF, low risk, high potential reward for the Knights, coming in as a walk-on, so it doesn't take a counter. Who knows if he's getting some type of compensation. Man, it feels like we're talking about the NFL. Like, oh yeah, he's on a team-friendly deal. It's a 1-year option, kind of prove it. I don't know, but any additional context you want to add?
I really liked Agi Hall coming out. And I'll just go back to the interview that we just had with Cortez Hankton. There is a lot more than just possessing the physical traits that goes into being successful, not only at the collegiate level, but having a career on Sundays as well, right? So when people ask, hey, what happened with Agi Hall? What happened with Cormani McClain? Well, one of those things was missing, and I can tell you this. The reason that these guys continue to get opportunities is because their ability that they offer. Everybody knows the physical capacity in which these type of players can operate. It's, can they do the things off the field to make them consistently successful? So that's how I would tie it into that.
Did I ever tell you the story about when I went to see a Agi Hall practice in the spring?
Mm-mm.
I can't even remember what high school he was supposed to be at, but showed up spring practice before his senior year, just not on the practice field. I'm like, hey, coach, where is it? Agi? Not sure. That vividly plays in the back of my head when you think about his career path.
Agi Hall, Cormani McClain, that's where we are in the calendar right now. 2 highly touted players that are looking for their next shot as potential walk-ons. Pretty interesting to kind of see this. I don't know, the walk-on used this way. I haven't really kind of seen that in the past.
Isn't there some type of NCAA rule that, or there's talk of going away with walk-ons?
Yeah, basically cutting the roster size down from 120 to 85. So
last thought on the bounce backs. What are we going to call them? High profile guys trying to find a home. Can you think of an example of where this has worked out? Like Eric Gilbert comes to mind at Nebraska. That hasn't gone all that well.
No, not really.
I'm going to marinate on that.
Yeah, it's a good one to do some research. If you're in the chat and you feel like you got an example of a bounce back of a guy that feels like they were maybe far out at sea, but they've been able to put it together, let us know. All right. Tuesday, Wednesday, you can find the boys. You know where to find them. 247sports.com. I told you where to find that. Pretty easy. 247sports.com. How about Thursday? We got 24/7 Sports live, 5 o'clock Eastern, jam-packed show. The crew here at 24/7 Sports bringing you the best. Make sure you lock into that show on Thursday. All right, time for some viewer questions. Chat's been relatively quiet today. Drew, we got a couple of these starred. We're talking about Florida, so let's continue the talk. Michael Gold, we appreciate you joining the show today. He says, is Florida on the right track to achieve sustained success? Parentheses, consistently competing for championships in a few years based on what they're doing on the trail in the portal currently.
Well, you brought up the too deep for the defense. And I had that thought in my head over the weekend when I dug into Florida's too deep. It's like, whoa, they have some players here. And then I think what also stands out is that quarterback room with Lagway, the quarterback of the future. So, my biggest question is going to be the transfers that Florida has gone after. I've always kind of wished they would get a little more aggressive in terms of the type of individuals that they target. Now they've hit on some of them, Cameron Jackson, the crew that Billy brought in from Louisiana, Montrell Johnson. So I think we've always said it's going to take some patience, but I do think Billy has tried to build it from the ground up with a foundation through the high school ranks. I think you're only going to see more of those guys making an impact here this fall for the Gators.
This is a year, right? I mean, they got to put it together. Year 3 is the year where it's you have to see kind of Florida move into that 9-win category. I think that's what they need to do. 8-9 wins for Billy Napier to continue to get some more time there in Gainesville. And Drew, I think you brought up a good point. They have done something that is very difficult to do. And it's to be determined whether or not they'll be successful. But they have stripped this thing down and have attempted to build it from the ground up. You think about bringing Lagway in, huge piece, right? Graham Mertz has been a hit for them. Think about what they've done with guys like Eugene Wilson. The offensive line continues, I think, to be a little bit of a question mark. We'll see what happens at the tackle spots. But defensively, they should be better this year. And a lot of that just has to do with experience, and they're talented. I can't wait to see Kelby Collins, what he looks like. You think about guys like Cam James as well. LJ McCray, you throw him in there. It ain't like they don't have pieces, right? And they got more than pieces. And this is the first time looking at their depth chart, brought to you by Next Gen, by the way, that they do a phenomenal. They've done a good job assembling this roster and building it from the ground up. And I think year 3, the way it should be, they got more depth than they've had in the prior 2 years. And I think that overall is going to be a very, very big positive for them. All right, you ready for hey, we got Mario Nash in here. Big Nash. What up, Coach Nash? Good to see you, man. Reply guy, who is great on Twitter, Drew. I've not read this question, so apologize. For the top 10 to 15 teams, which class of 2025 individual player rankings do y'all hear the most complaining about from various fan bases? For Notre Dame, I have to imagine it's Will Black. Thanks. Love the pod. Thank you, Reply guy. I don't know. Drew, is there one that comes to mind?
Oh, well, it's always the quarterbacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every fan base thinks their quarterback is, a 4-star or a 5-star, maybe even a 6-star. So the quarterbacks are the ones we hear about frequently. Really, Cooper, you can disagree with this. It's like whatever the most recent commit is. Why is this guy ranked where he is? Why isn't this guy ranked higher? Just whoever that individual is. Will Black, sure. I mean, Deuce Knight from the Notre Dame class. I think you could also put him in that category. What else you got?
I don't know. I just think it's funny. It's typically when you go out on the road, and most of the time it's all in good fun, but people act like they don't know what the rankings are. And then they say, I think he's a composite 4-star, but there might be one side out there that's got him as a 3. And I'm like, well, you're talking to me. I know which site that is. That's us, right? I know what point you're trying to make. I'll tell you this, and this is what I tell people on the road. I'm very, very confident in our process. I'm very, very confident in our research. I'm very, very confident in us, in our team's ability to go out on the road, take in information, and be deliberate with it. And ultimately, at the end of the day, we got to get it right at the end of the day. And it might not be on everybody's timeline, but this is something that does take time to disseminate this information, put our heads together, and make sure that we are making the most highly educated decisions at the end of the day, and also knowing that we're not going to get it right all the time. But the standard is for us to be right, and we understand that. So I like what we're doing. I guess I'll just say that.
I think the other thing, Coop, right? Like, we are not going to get it perfect 1 through 247, and that's going to be reflected in the NFL draft 34 years down the line. I mean, we're trying to take some calculated shots, and I do think and I certainly get it, fan bases, hey, this kid's having a great offseason. Why hasn't he moved up in the rankings? He's tore up this camp, etc. There is a lot of thought that goes into it. It's not like we're pulling strings and trying to move guys up. I think, for example, Tramel Jones, right, the Florida State quarterback commit, excellent this offseason. We're going to get him at the Elite 11 finals. I'm planning to be at his spring game next Thursday. It's like, should we move him before, we get those next 2 evaluations, or should we wait to see what we really think after those 2? So it's a process. And, it's constant every day, every week conversations about these guys. And, no fan base is happy with their ranking. No prospect is happy with their ranking. Well, I think Jeremiah Smith was pretty excited when we told him he was going to be number 1. But outside of that, no one else ever seems to be too fired up.
It comes with the territory. All right, last one. This is a great question. I'm glad, Andrew, you asked this. Andrew Moorman asked this. It says, my duck question of the day, do you think Josh Conerly has a better chance of improving his stock to a first round in 2025 or staying for his senior season? I'm glad you asked this. Conerly was, our number 1 tackle, 2022?
Andrew, I'm going to say this. We have been talking about this behind the scenes for a while, and I already know Cooper's answer. Yeah, I think when you look, and we are not NFL draft guys, maybe we need to get Lance Zierlein on the pod, O-line guru. To me, he's the one that looks like he could skyrocket in this 2025 draft cycle when talking about offensive tackles.
Yeah, I agree. Short answer here is I think it's more likely that Conerly is just going to continue to rise up draft boards. I think we said it the other day on the show, but there was a scout that had talked about Conerly just being the must-see guy on the West Coast as the best prospect going into the 2025 NFL draft. So the thing about Conerly is what's unique about him, basketball background, coming out of Seattle, two-way guy, never really been in a structured program, and I mean that with all due respect, but going from local high school in Seattle, Washington, at Rainier Beach, I believe, to Oregon, to that strength conditioning program under Wilson Love, and then just what they do from a structural standpoint, nutrition standpoint, weightlifting standpoint. He was a guy that was Drew, like 285 pounds, had all the right traits, reactionary quickness, really good foot body quickness, elite level athlete. He goes to Oregon, and you were just banking on the development of this kid. And we knew he was wired the right way. And every year, redshirt year, starts last year, just gotten better and better and better and better. I think he's going to make another leap this year. And then I think, Conerly is going to be one of those guys. Like, it's funny right now. You see some of the names at the top of the tackle board, like Tyler Booker, is an interior offensive lineman. Will Campbell was a guy that was heavily debated coming out, and a lot of that had to do with his arm length. I'm going to be interested to see how NFL teams see him. Is he more like a Peter Skoronski that played tackle in college and they're going to move inside the guard? Or is he going to play on the right side? He's played left his entire career. And then you got Conerly, and then you got Conerly, who's like the prototypical left. Like this is what you want. This is kind of what you look for. Kind of more of like the Marius Mims type of category, right? So those dudes, and we saw with Marius Mims, like dependability, availability, he battled, guy still got taken first round, right? These dudes are really, really, really hard to find. So, yes, that was meant to be a short-winded answer, but yeah, I believe Josh Conerly is going to be a draft favorite in a short couple of months.
So if I'm in the Bahamas and I can bet first overall pick Josh Conerly,
That was my other thought, Drew. Maybe not first overall, but if there is a top 20.
No, there's no such thing as a top 20 ticket.
What is there then?
I've only seen like this early out, like number one pick. Because I had Anthony Richardson, 2 years ago? Got him at a really nice number. And that was before he was even in, showing up in mock drafts. And what did he go, 5 overall?
Are you on the Cam Ward Heisman ticket?
I need my Hard Rock here in the free state of Florida to offer that up yet. No, they have not offered it.
All right, final thoughts, Drew. You got any? Long show today.
Cortez Hankton, man, dig into the resume. We didn't even ask him about George Pickens when he was at Georgia. I mean, that guy has done it all. And to hear him bring up coaching in high school is what really got me into feeling the industry. I thought that was awesome. And just him reiterating what he's kind of looking for in these players. I mean, he coached 2 of the best. He's going to have more of the best. That Ladd McConkey story was awesome. A guy, I think, that's got a bright future ahead of him. And hey, if he's like the guest we had last offseason, probably in line for a big promotion.
I agree. Cortez Hankton, salt of the earth, great human being. I met him on a crosswalk in San Antonio with my brother when my brother was working at Columbia in the Ivy Leagues, and we're at the AFCA. And I'll tell you this, man, like the AFCA, you ever go to these coaches conventions, it's all about logo chasing. Most of it for most people, they look at the logo on your shirt and then they assess who they're talking to. That was not this guy. One of the most down-to-earth, humble human beings and a great coach. And it's been pretty awesome to kind of see his development. And, excited that we got to get him on the show. And I'm excited that everybody else got to learn a little something about him as well. So, Drew, that's all I got, man. All good?
All good.
Let's get out of here, guys. Same time tomorrow. We appreciate you joining us. Hour, 12 minutes. God, I love it. Make sure to like and subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. For the DOS, Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. See you tomorrow.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, it says we're still live.
Ooh.